thank you so much for coming. It's such a glorious day outside. Thank you for not being seduced by the sunshine coming in here. It's always rather difficult to know how to compress a book that took 2 years to write into a 45-minute talk. I hate leaving things out, especially material that's as irresistible as the material I was dealing with when I was researching Bluestockings. What I thought I'd do is just give you a sort of illustrated overview of the history of university education for women in England, and a glimpse of the prejudice that the early pioneers faced, not just from the academic establishment, but from the medical profession as well. I'm going to set the scene with a very short reading from the book. It follows a day in the life of Bessie MacLeod, who was a student at Girton, just 2 miles out of Cambridge, in 1881. It starts at 6:30, when the shriek of an alarm clock and Bessie fumbling about in the dark with chilblained fingers for a candle. Once it's lit, she wraps up warmly and takes it through to her ensuite study to do an hour's Latin. She has to pick her way through the debris of last night's revels. She had a cocoa party, and her guests brought cake. The gyp, or maid, will clear these up later, after she's delivered Bessie her daily ration of coal for the fire and a jug of hot water for washing. At 8 o'clock, it's prayers. As a fresher, a first year, Bessie has to sit at the back, which means she's late to breakfast. By the time she gets to the dining hall, there is nothing left but an unalluring cocktail of cold ham and treacle. She has a cup of tea instead, and making sure there are no tutors around to see, she sprints straight back upstairs to continue her Latin prose, which she has until 10 a.m. to complete. Sprinting is not what Girtonians do. She rushes her work to the post room, the ink still wet, just in time for it to be bundled up and dispatched to a tutor down the road in Cambridge. There are several postal collections and deliveries a day, and it's quicker to mail essays and assignments than physically to take them. The rest of the morning is spent on theology, Greek and maths. Lunch is at 1 p.m, and to signal that she's not in the mood for conversation, Bessie arms herself with a stern expression and a book. Neither works. With awful inevitability, Girton's dreariest daughter makes straight for her. The college population is encouraged to take a constitutional stroll around the grounds after lunch. At 2 o'clock, Bessie has a lecture, and the rest of the afternoon evaporates in work. The menu for dinner at 6 o'clock is unpromising. Fish, mutton casserole, potatoes, turnips, and sago pudding. Feeling weary and weighed down by storage, Bessie looks forward to a little free time, and then remembers tonight is fire drill night. Every women's college in the country had its own fire brigade, unless it happened to be in a city centre, which very few of them were. In Bessie's era, there was still candlelight. Surprisingly soon, smoking was allowed in students' rooms, and of course open fires were everywhere, right up until the Second World War. Girton especially relied on its brigade. It would be ages before the Cambridge firefighters got there on their horse-drawn carriages in an emergency. The Girton Fire Brigade boasted buckets and hoses and a portable chute for dramatic bedroom rescues. There are several photographs in university archives of young women beaming from top-floor windows, holding the cavernous mouth of a rickety-looking canvas tube down which they must plummet when the flames start licking at their stay laces. One of the maids at Lady Margaret Hall at Oxford was so plump that she was excused the chute for fear of getting stuck. Death rather than indignity. Bessie works until just after 9 p.m, then it's off to a dress rehearsal for the Drama Society play, Thackeray's The Rose and the Ring, and at last, when everyone else is tucked up asleep, she returns to her room. The fire has long since died down, so it's rapidly growing cold. Breath steaming, her last task of the day is to set the alarm for next morning, 6:30 again. So, what led to young women like Bessie ending up at university? And what happened to them in the years between 1869, when Girton was founded, and 1939, which is when my book closes? That's really what Bluestockings is about. I remember being thrilled when my English teacher called me a Bluestocking the day I won a place at Oxford. I wasn't expected to get in. No girls from my school had got in before. And the college to which I had blithely applied was renowned for its clever women. Being a rather naive country girl from a rural comprehensive, I naturally assumed that Bluestockings were part of the uniform, and that on special academic occasions, with a gown and a cap and a sober suit, I should wear them too. Someone put me right before I embarrassed myself too much, but achieving Bluestocking status remained a slightly exotic badge of intellectual honour in my imagination. I use the term with a small b throughout the book and throughout this talk, just to mean a female university student. Strictly speaking, I can't call them undergraduates, because as you heard from Kelly's introduction, a lot of them were not actually allowed to graduate until 1948. I'll explain a bit more about that later on. You may well know that the very first Bluestocking with a capital B of all was not a woman, but a naturalist, a writer by the name of Benjamin Stillingfleet. He belonged to a group of fashionably learned friends who met together during the latter half of the 18th century in various London salons to cultivate the art of intellectual conversation. The novelty of Stillingfleet's group was that most of its members were female. One evening in 1756, Stillingfleet presented himself at the literary hostess Elizabeth Montagu's house for one of the company's regular meetings, bizarrely clad, not in the customary white silken hose that everybody else wore, but in workaday knitted blue stockings. Woad blue wool was cheap and common. Mrs. Montagu and her friends thought it hilarious that Stillingfleet was eccentric enough not only to possess such garments, but actually to wear them in public. Stillingfleet's solecism was gossiped about throughout literary London, and soon Mrs. Montagu's clique became known collectively as the Bluestocking philosophers. Her house was dubbed Bluestocking Lodge, or the College, and came to be considered an urbane sort of private university, over which she and her scholarly lady friends presided as unofficial doctors of letters. A correspondence emerged in the literary press about how far this university idea should go. In March 1773, a new vice-chancellor was installed at Oxford, and as part of the celebrations, some honorary degrees were conferred. It was reported that a saboteur was present during the ceremony. A woman dressed as a man had outrageously got herself awarded a degree. This apocryphal incident caused much merriment in the press, but also sparked off a serious debate about whether or not academical ladies, like the Bluestockings, should formally be recognised.